Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, the Dodgers won their 111th game of the season. We'll talk a little bit about the game. We'll get into some stuff that happened during the game, some accomplishments the Dodgers got. Talk about Clayton Kershaw, talk about Trey Turner, and then we'll get into Jaime Harin and his final home broadcast. That's all in here. That's what's coming up, and that's what's on tap. So make sure to keep it Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. This is the daily podcast covering the Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Make it easy on yourself and subscribe in both of those places, and you'll never miss a day because you know we're not going to. And while individually we have both missed days, we have not yet missed a day on this podcast, Locked On Dodgers. If this is your first time listening or watching, I'm Samperio, back together here with Jeff Snider. We haven't been together in a while, but we're here today. And we're both lifelong Dodgers fans that cover the Dodgers currently and have covered the Dodgers in the past, both in the press box and locker room and everything else that goes on around there. But we're not insiders. We're just here bringing you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. And Jeff, by the looks of it, we're both going playoff beard mode. So there's that also as well.
Yeah, I was telling you before we start recording, this might be the first time in my life that I actually feel like somebody would look at me and think that guy has a beard. You know, it used to be I'd grow it this long and I'd look like if I kept it up for another couple months, I might someday be described as that guy who looks like he might be trying to grow a beard. But, you know, I think if it wasn't so gray, it would actually look like a beard. So I'm kind of enjoying this. It's a new thing for me. Who knew that baby faces could slightly go away at age 45?
There we go. Yeah, there's always room for growth, and beard growth being one of those growth, I guess. The Dodgers had growth from last year. Last year they won 106 games. This year they ended up with 111. Yeah, how dare they? This year ended up with 111, and even though we both individually talked about how this series and just how it was concerned maybe by some people that the offense wasn't scoring and everything else and blah, blah, blah. And, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. But it's still nice to see the offense put up 6 runs. It was nice to see Trey Turner hit the ball over the wall for the first time in a while. And Freddie Freeman tried his best to take that batting title from Jeff McNeil, but ended up falling just short.
Yeah, it was obviously the thing we were hoping for most today was just put up a good performance, just head into the offseason, get that 111th win. It's overall meaningless, but 111 is better than 110, especially because it does officially give this Dodgers team the title of best team in franchise history by winning percentage. They already had the most wins, but now they have the best winning percentage too. So there's no argument to be made. This is the best Dodger team ever for a regular season. And so that you want to win it for that reason. But also, you want to see, okay, Freddie Freeman, 0 for his last 12, 3 straight 0 for 4s. Freddie never does that. So you kind of felt going in like, okay, he's not going to go 0 for again. The only question was, can he pull off a 4 for 4 that he needs to get to 200 hits and to win the batting title? And he almost did, got to 3 for 4, but yeah. And seeing Trey Turner hit the ball hard a couple times, had the home run, he had a base hit and he looked a little bit more like himself. And early in the game, I think he struck out both of his first 2 times up. And in each at bat, there was at least one call where he got a strike called on him that wasn't in the strike zone. And you could see on his face, like, dude, I'm struggling enough. I don't need you back here being bad at your job. Do better. And so I'm sure for him, it was a load off his shoulders to actually hit that home run and then hit a base hit. And, Joe Davis said during the game, sometimes it just takes one swing to get you out of that slump. And I think those first 2 at bats, he was thinking, oh, this might last forever, especially the umpires keep being bad. And, but he didn't blow up on the umpire and he just took matters in his own hands. And so, yeah, all in all, it was definitely a good way to finish the season.
Yeah. And let's just stick with Trey Turner because he had some quotes, a couple articles written the last day or so about him and his swing. And that's actually one of the things that one of the hitting coaches the Dodgers have mentioned was it might just take that one swing to get him going, get him right. And Trey's been working hard before the game. He's been doing individual work. He's been doing cage work. He was out there hitting against Trinan and whoever else threw live before the game.
Dustin
And
May.
yeah, Dustin May. And he's clearly searching for something, which is, the way he was speaking made it seem like he was having one of the worst seasons of his career. And yeah, he has cooled down over the last couple months, and the numbers have been down. But overall, he got to 100 RBIs with that 3-run home run. He needed the 3 RBI. He got to 100 RBI first time in his career. He, finished second in the league with number of hits, right behind Freddie Freeman. First duo to do that since 2001. But I think, I don't know if it's a combination of just, him kind of, he made it seem like he hasn't really been comfortable all season, even when the success was happening. So he's searching for something. The biggest thing they mentioned was his hand placement, and hopefully those last 2 at-bats that he had are where he figured it out, and those were that one swing that you need to get it going. Because as I remember last year, he had a really, really bad start to the postseason. NLCS, he picked it up a little bit, but all in all, 11 for 51, and wasn't that great. And it left a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth. And this is a contract year for him, and not that it's going to come back and hurt him. He's still going to get a large amount of money from some team, maybe the Dodgers, but I'm sure that's in his mind a little bit as well, as I don't want to do that again in October.
Yeah, and it was kind of a down season, especially last year. You remember he was pretty hot after he came to the Dodgers. I think his batting average is in the 310s when he came to the Dodgers. He ended up leading the league in batting average, almost at 330. I don't remember where he ended up at 328-ish, something like that. And so he was very, very good. And this year, yeah, his final season batting average ended up 298, which is, most people would be really happy with that. 298, 192 hits, 100 runs scored, 100 RBIs, great season. And it excites me a little bit, makes me a little bit happy that he does think of it as kind of a down season. And you and I talked during the year. It's like, it's kind of weird that he is as good as he is, because his approach at the plate doesn't always look great. He swings at a lot of crap. But he puts the bat on the ball most of the time and hits the ball well. And so I think there is more in the tank. And what I'm really hoping is that this can kickstart all the work he's been putting in. Could end up being a blessing in disguise if that work leads to October success. If he was batting 340 coming into September, he could have just kind of got complacent, and instead he's had to work at it, and hopefully that will pay dividends in October. Me, I'm not a believer in this guy's bad in October. I don't think that I think it exists sometimes, but for the most part, I think it's overblown. I think guys have slumps sometimes, and when those slumps happen in October, they get labeled as bad in the postseason. But Corey Seager was bad in the postseason until he was otherworldly in the postseason. Cody Bellinger's first postseason, you remember how bad he was in that Astros World Series? And then he's had some huge hits for the Dodgers in the postseason since then. Barry Bonds was famously very, very bad in the postseason, and then he turned into the best postseason hitter ever, all naturally, entirely on his own. So good hitters are going to be good hitters. And so I'm very, very hopeful that Trey Turner, who is a good hitter, will be a good hitter in the postseason.
Yeah, that would be ideal. We are going to talk about Clayton Kershaw because he had a really good last start, and he's had a really good last month or so. So we're going to do that right after we talk about BetOnline, because BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your football betting info this season. They got all the latest player developments, team matchups, power rankings, news, podcasts, in-depth articles, analysis on every game you can find. And BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. So head to betonline.net today on your laptop or mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Jeff. So Clayton Kershaw, last start of the season, Dave Roberts mentioned he was going to go about 4 or 5 innings, just depending on how stressful those innings are and where his pitch count was. Ended up going 5, ended up striking out 9. He needed 6 going into the game to pass Cy Young on the all-time strikeouts list for 24th. He passed that, so he's now solely in 24th place all-time for strikeouts. You would imagine hopefully comes back and adds to that in the next year, maybe 2 years. But it just continues a string that Kershaw's had since coming back from the injured list of being really good and missing a lot of bats.
Yeah, he now has, I think, 30 strikeouts in 23 innings over his last 4 starts, which is very, very good, especially for him at this stage of his career. He's still been solid as far as strikeouts go, but he hasn't been quite the strikeout guy that he had been in the past. At his peak in 2015, he averaged 11.6 strikeouts per nine. If you look at actual strikeout percentage that year, he was 33.8. This year, he's down at 27.8 coming into this game, which is one of the lowest of his career. 2018 and 2019 were both a little bit lower, but he's been striking out more lately, which is a good thing only because I do think strikeout rate is a little overblown as far as how important it is, or whether it's more important in the postseason. I talked about that the other day that, outs are outs, but you do face better teams, better hitters in the postseason in general. And so the more you can strike out, the better. And so if he can come in with some of that strikeout stuff, or even if, having the stuff that can strike out 9 Rockies in 5 innings, even that if that only translates to striking out 6 Mets in 6 innings, well, that's better than 3 strikeouts in 6 innings, And so there's a lot of promise there. And it actually reminded me of 2015. If you remember, I tweeted about this, that going into the last game of the season in 2015, Kershaw was on an abbreviated start, and he came into the game with 294 strikeouts on the season. So he needed 6 strikeouts to get there, and we knew he was only going 4 innings. And so it's like, oh, can he do it? And he struck out 7. He got there really, really quick, went 3 2/3 innings, struck out 7 to hit 301 for the season. And then, so for him to come into this, there was some fun parallels, needing 6 strikeouts to pass Cy Young, and then blowing past that again, striking out 9. And just it's hard to picture a more promising last month or so. Kershaw, after the game, couldn't even remember how many starts he's made since he came off the injured list, and looks like this was his 7th. And in those 7 starts, he's allowed 7 runs in 42 innings, which is really, really good. And it's hard to picture a more promising last month or so heading into the postseason. And it looks like the Dodgers were right. We found out that after his back injury in early August, he felt ready to come back almost immediately. And he was just like, okay, once the 15 days are up, I'll be back. And it was the Dodgers, Dave Roberts in the front office, who said, no, let's hold off. Let's make sure you're totally 100%. And they, he was getting antsy. There were times it sounded like he was frustrated that they hadn't let him come back yet. But he acknowledged after the game that the timing has been perfect, that he had just enough time to get, he feels fully built up, but also fully rested and fresh going into the postseason, which is exactly what they were hoping for. And, we'll see if it pays off the way they're hoping. But so far, what we know so far, it's hard to say anything other than that the Dodgers handled Kershaw's achy back pretty much perfectly.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with the results. I mean, in those 7 starts, 49 strikeouts, just 8 walks, 0.85 whip. He's done, been dominant. He was 5-0 with the 1.54 ERA in those 7 games. So, and, finishes the year at 2.28, which is one of the lowest of his career. Yeah, a little bit less innings, but still got over 125 innings, had more strikeouts than innings, had a whip of 0.94. He's been that guy for them all year. And it goes a little bit to a question, not a question, I think we know the answer, but they asked Dave Roberts kind of about the starting rotation and how it's going to go. And, he didn't name Julio the game 1 starter. He didn't name Kershaw the game 1 starter. He kind of danced around it and said, let's tell you, I'll peek behind the curtain that whoever starts game 1 is, we're looking at somebody that can come back for a game 5. And while both those guys probably fit that mold, I do think it's going to be Julio going game 1. And I don't think, anyone would have an issue with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they've already decided that, and it's just Dave Roberts doesn't like to tell the media any more than he has to before he has to. It wouldn't make, Julio is their best pitcher this year. He should go in game 1. That's how a postseason rotation should go. And, and hopefully they win the series in 3 games and, 3 or 4 games, and nobody has to go in game 5, and you can start Julio again in game 1 of the NLCS. But yeah, I mean, you go with your best, and there's no wrong answer between Kershaw and Julio, but there's definitely a more right answer, and that answer is Julio.
Yeah. And one more point on Kershaw. I think you have the quote pulled up of, last year, we remember the last series of the season last year when the Dodgers lost Clayton Kershaw, the Dodgers lost Max Muncy. Muncy took a while to get going and figure it out, but, he's not nearing the end of his career, whereas Kershaw could be nearing the end of his career. He's had a lot of injuries. He's been on the IL pretty much every year, at least once. But he wasn't even sure. And, for a guy like Clayton Kershaw, who's, has the utmost confidence, he puts in the work, does everything right, as they say. Even he was not surprised, but even he wasn't sure going into the season how he was going to be.
Yeah, and here's the quote. A reporter asked him, "Did you ever have any doubt after the injury last year that you could come back and be as dominant as you've been?" And he said, "Yeah, for sure. I didn't feel great until March, basically. So there's a lot of unknowns going into this year, let alone performance-wise. Overall, I think I'm not going to say I'm surprised, but definitely thankful that I felt all right this year, and the stuff kind of held up." And also in that same question and answer session, he was talking a little bit about why he came back to the Dodgers. He said, "This is why I'm here. It's why I wanted to be here." You think back in March, thinking about your life and different options and things like that. And this is what we want to do. That doesn't mean it's just going to come easy, obviously. It's going to be a grind, it's going to be a challenge, but that's why I'm here. That's what I want. And I'm looking forward to the next month. And, it kind of underscores what you and I talked about basically all offseason that Clayton Kershaw is either coming back to the Dodgers or he's retiring. He is not going to go to the Rangers because Clayton Kershaw is accustomed to winning. He's accustomed to playing on good teams. And, that's basically what he said. He didn't say the Rangers by name today, but he said, "I'm here because I want to win. I want to be a part of winning." And, the only, it was scary last year because he was going into free agency when he got hurt, and it was kind of a sudden thing. It's like, crap, we're expecting a postseason with him, and now all of a sudden he's not pitching again before free agency, and we don't know what's going to happen. This year, he's going into free agency again. This could have been his last regular season game as a Dodger. I don't think so. He said last week that he is leaning towards coming back or leaning towards playing next year, but he didn't even seem to allow for any possibility of playing anywhere else. It seems like it's Dodgers or nowhere. And I think he's going to be back, because he is still really, really good and really loves competing. And I think he's actually enjoying it more than he was when he was the best pitcher in baseball. I think he's found a way to have more fun playing baseball too. And I don't think he's ready to give that up because this team has been so much fun this year and he's smiled more this year. And I think he's realizing, and some of that is because he's already polished his Hall of Fame credentials. He is in the Hall of Fame. And maybe it was necessary for him to be such a curmudgeon earlier in his career. That's old man talk for Grumpy. In order to be as great as he was. But now he's realizing I can have fun and still be very good and he's the number 2 starter on a team that just won 111 games, the best team in franchise history. And he's not just along for the ride. He's the number 2 starter. And, it's hard to picture him walking away from that.
Yeah. I mean, there's no real way. If the Dodgers do win it this year and he does well, there's still always that possibility. But I feel at this point, especially with the Dodgers, because they can do 20 starts from Kershaw a year and still be fine with it, they're going to have that depth. Not a lot of teams can offer that. And that's the other part that plays into it. So, yeah, salute to Kershaw and look forward to seeing him at Dodger Stadium next week pitching in Game 2 of the NLDS. So, real quick, we are going to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Make sure to check it out on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. And now let's move into the final segment of the day, which is about Jaime Harin. He was, it's been a week-long celebration for him pretty much. He got recognized on Saturday, and he's been getting love shown to him all week. This was his last home broadcast. And someone that he fills a niche, obviously, in the Dodgers world, in the baseball world. But for those in that world, he is up there with Vin Scully, if not maybe a little bit better, depending, how often they listen to him. And just knowing that, Vin did it for so long, Jaime did it for so long. Us as Dodger fans, if you speak English or Spanish, you've been very, very spoiled. And then now, I don't know if they have the Joe Davis and waiting. I don't know if they've announced who's going to be in after him, but we want to just take the time to appreciate Jaime Harin for all he's done and being there and everything else. And it ended up, Vin won his last home game and Jaime wins his last home game. So all good.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm an English speaker. My Spanish is pretty rudimentary. I took 2 years in high school and 2 semesters in college, and I grew up in Lake Elsinore, and so I mean, my best friend's mom didn't speak a word of English, and so but I mean, mostly what she said to me was, "Hello, Jeff, you hungry?" So, and that was in English. The rest of the time, I didn't know what she was saying, and the answer was always, "Yeah, I'm hungry. I could eat." Um, but for fans who do speak Spanish, and one of the things that's really struck me is there's so many people kind of like you, Vince, and a lot of people who are first or second generation English speakers, but they still have parents and grandparents who speak Spanish. And I think Jaime Harin has been a way for them to stay connected to their parents and their grandparents of like, hey, I'm more of an English speaker than a Spanish speaker, but I know enough Spanish. I'm going to go listen to the Dodger game in Spanish with my grandpa, and connection. And for me, that connection was Vin Scully with my grandpa. I used to go to my grandparents' house. My grandpa would be sitting in the garage watching the game on his TV, and he'd have the radio right next to it, so that when the fourth inning hit and Vin went to radio, he'd turn that to the TV and turn on the radio so we could keep listening to Vin. And I think Jaime Harin is that same exact thing, like you said, for the Spanish speaking community. And because it is that language, for me to stay connected to my grandpa was important, but my grandpa and I had the same language, and I think there are a lot of Dodger fans who don't speak the same language primarily as their grandparents. And so Jaime Harin was a way to bridge that. And one of those people is George Lopez. And I don't know if you saw the essay he wrote for Variety talking about Jaime Harin. And he said, Jaime Harin was your eyes and ears of a sport when you didn't speak the language. He allowed you to understand it. He would tell you what he saw on the field and make you feel like you were there. And then George Lopez says, for me, hearing Jaime Harin's voice is equivalent to the smell of my grandmother's cooking and the warmth of her kitchen. It's a feeling that tells me I'm going to be okay no matter what else is going on. And like my grandparents, Jaime Harin's voice has been there for my whole life. Funny thing is, I came to prefer listening to Harin call Dodger games, and my grandfather preferred to listen to Vin Scully. Back in the days when people thought that children should be seen and not heard, we didn't talk much, but baseball was something we did together. And, it's sappy, but it's so true, and I think all of us baseball fans, Dodger fans, for the most part, we do have a family connection. If you're listening to this, you think about, how did you become a baseball fan? How did you become a Dodger fan? Chances are it was family. My dad was 4 years old when the Dodgers moved to LA. He was growing up in La Puente, just close to LA. And when the Dodgers moved there, his family became Dodger fans. He became a Dodger fan. They were a Dodger family. So by the time I was born 20 years later, it was already a Dodger family. I was born into a Dodger family, and I had this connection, So my earliest memories, like I say, watching the games in the garage with my grandpa, hearing my grandma talk about Big D and Little D, Don Drysdale and Don Sutton, her two favorite players. This connection between generations. When I think about 2018 World Series Game 3, the 18-inning game that Max Muncy hit the walk-off homer, I remember the home run, but what I really remember is sitting at that game with my two sons and my dad and my uncle watching the game together at Dodger Stadium. Baseball is a way to connect families, and Jaime Harin, because of the way he connected families who didn't necessarily speak the same language as each other, at least primarily, I think his impact, it's impossible to overstate how important he is to such a huge percentage of the Dodger community.
Yeah, and it's hard to, like I said, overstate it, but it's also easy to overlook, kind of, if you don't, speak Spanish or you've never listened to a Hadim broadcast. And I would say that growing up, unless even my grandparents, that if they did watch the Dodger game, my grandpa or my grandpa on both sides, they would watch in English, but I think that was more for us more than anything. I think, if they would have played Harin a little bit more often, I would have been fine with it and got into it. And you really learn the words that are different that you wouldn't, there's words that you don't think about in Spanish and English that are related to baseball only that they sound a little bit weird sometimes. But yeah, I mean, he's a guy, like I said, that hard overlook. There was at one point where he went, I think, like 4,000 games in a row before ending the streak. Yeah, from 62 to 84, 4,000 consecutive games nearly. And I think the cool part, Joe mentioned it on the broadcast, was that early on he didn't travel and he would listen to Vin's broadcast and then basically just translate it into what was going on for the Spanish broadcast, which, I didn't learn till today, but that's an interesting story. And he would meet with Vin before the game and, ask for weather conditions and crowd and, a bunch of other things and this and that. And, he was a master at his craft, even though he couldn't be there. And now obviously it's a lot different, because of pandemic, people weren't traveling as much, but you didn't really miss a beat because you could literally watch it. He would have to, listen and translate and do everything at once. And yeah, he's been there forever, and now he gets his own booth there at Dodger Stadium. And yeah, it's just, it's hard to not be proud as a Dodger fan that we have, Vince Scully and Jaime Harin, and it's good to see him get his flowers now. Maybe hasn't quite gotten them the way he should over over his career, but for him to get them now and for him to get everything that he's gotten this last year has been good to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Two other things I want to say about him. First of all, don't want to overlook the fact his voice is so good. Like, even if you don't speak Spanish, you can enjoy listening to Jaime Harin calling a Dodger game. You'll occasionally pick up words you do know, even if it's just names. But I mean, his voice is so good. And it's kind of like Charlie Steiner, really bad at describing what's happening in a baseball game, but a really pleasant voice. He's pleasant to listen to as long as you don't need to know what's going on. Well, that if you're an English speaker, Jaime Harin offers the same thing. And the other thing that probably needs to be mentioned is Fernando Mania wouldn't have been Fernando Mania without Jaime Harin. He would, Joe and Oral talked about this. He is kind of a central figure in Fernando Valenzuela's ascension. He served as Fernando's main interpreter during the time when Fernando didn't speak any English and was, a 20-year-old kid from Mexico in this whole new world. And, we look at Fernando now and polished and refined and speaks good English and everything. And it's easy for us who, I was only 4 years old Fernando's rookie year. You weren't even born. You were still a decade away from being born. It's easy to forget what that would have been like for Fernando at that time and the impact that Jaime Harin had on him. And I think it's wonderful that they've now been able to be broadcast partners for so long because they are kind of inextricably tied in Dodger history. And for Jaime's last season to be the year that Mike Brito passed away, and for Julio to win the ERA title, first Mexican-born player ever to do that. It's kind of there's a lot of things, and really it needs to go out. Vin's last regular season game was his last game. Jaime Harin, because he calls on the radio, he gets to keep going through the postseason, and so hopefully his last game will be calling a Dodgers World Series victory. Maybe Julio's the winning pitcher. Maybe Bruce Dargratterall gets the save, another Spanish speaker, but whatever it is, Jaime Harin has been so wonderful for so long and such a blessing to the Dodger community. And I love seeing him smile because he is a guy more than just about anybody who deserves to be happy.
Yeah, and just, behind the scenes too, he's a guy who says hi to everybody when you see him in the press box before the game. He, even if he doesn't know you, he'll always say hi, or if you want to strike up a conversation, he'll have one with you. So yeah, all around, great broadcaster, great guy. And like I said, that thing with Fernando Mania is also, that's probably, that's where the Dodgers started getting that crowd, and their first memories are listening to Jaime more than likely doing those broadcasts and doing everything. So he's been with people, and there are some people that are way more connected to him than obviously you and I are, but we still can sit here and talk about him and his legacy, and make sure that it gets the recognition it deserves.
Absolutely. And we would love to hear your thoughts. If you're watching on YouTube, if you have Jaime Harin memories, we'd love to hear them. If you're listening on the podcast, tweet at us. He deserves to be honored even more than he is being.
Yeah. All right, Jeff. So regular season over 162 games out of the way. We got a few days before, depending how you handle the playoffs, but I say the playoff stress coming. But do you have anything else for today's episode?
No, I'm glad my beard is already gray to start with because the playoff stress, maybe you'll be looking more like me by the end of the playoffs.
Oh, that's very possible. I actually did find my first gray hair the other day. So,
Congratulations, man.
yeah. So maybe all the Dodger stress has caught up to me eventually. But yeah, that's gonna do it
Absolutely.
for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day with our pal Sully. He covers everything in the league going on, and it's the number one daily league-wide podcast. You can find it wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube. That's where you can find us as well. You just have to search for Locked On Dodgers. You can also search for Locked On Dodgers on Twitter and Instagram. And you can find Jeff on Twitter at Snider. I'm at Vince Samperio. The DMs are open on all those accounts if you need to get a hold of us. You can also get a hold of us via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us when you get in your car or if you're at home. To your smart device play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.
We'll talk to you tomorrow.